Hey, this is Gary.
This is Mike.
And Daniel. We're not professionals. We're just three addicts sharing our experiences, strength, and hope regarding recovery.
Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to other addicts and to practice these principles in our lives.
Welcome to another episode of the 12th Step Podcast. My name is Gary.
This is Mike.
And this is Daniel.
And I'm practicing my radio voice.
I noticed.
All right, welcome to Resilience Part 2. In our previous episode, we talked a little bit about the different expert systems that kind of fall into the headline resilience.
Yeah.
Just to recap, it was intention, self-care, accountability, study, reflection, and recovery support. Tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about the other six.
Very
Yes.
good. And let's define again resilience as per our common counselor Shane. I just love this description. The ability. Resilience is the ability to play a poor hand well. Each one of us have played cards before, and there's nothing worse than being dealt a really lousy hand.
Sure.
I mean, this now makes more sense. I mean, there's been several times that I've been, in session with Shane. He's like, you got dealt a really sucky hand,
Yeah.
but you still are moving along. You're
Right.
still trying to get a better hand, and I'm like, now that makes sense.
That makes complete sense.
Now that makes more sense to me.
Absolutely, it does. And you're still in the game,
Yeah.
and it means you've got a turn to take and a move to make.
That just
Right.
the gambler from Kenny Rogers is running through my head now. No one to fold him, no one to hold him.
no.
Oh dear.
There'll be no sleep tonight.
All right, guys.
Nope.
So, I got the easy ones.
You did.
No, I did not.
You did.
These are some deep ones. All right, the first one that we're going to talk a little bit about is intuition.
Yeah. That's one for me that I've had to really work on. That's definitely something, I wasn't really allowed to develop in my intuition, and that's something that I've always, especially with my last marriage, as growing up as a kid, I had gut feelings, but they were always like, nope, that's wrong. And so I learned that, no, those weren't real. And so, especially over the last couple of years, I've had to really rely on that is something. I need to pay attention to that.
Right.
If something is nagging at me, like, wow, that's my intuition speaking that I need to move forward with that. For example, recently I just, with a job offer, I had, they gave me an offer, and I'm like, can I deal with that? Like in the past, I was like, okay, they give me an offer, I would just take it. And this time, I'm like, I just had this feeling of, no, I need to go back, and I did, and it turned out favorably. And that's because I'm following that intuition, where in the past I just ignored it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I got to think of how to say this. I think that developing your intuition is more than just listening to it. I think the more that you develop it, it actually becomes better.
I think you're
it
right.
does, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
A little more accurate. It's
Yeah.
something that you can that if you nurture it and pay attention to it, that it actually becomes more
Part of who you are.
more
Yeah.
intuitive.
Yeah, I mean,
But yeah.
it's
Intuitively speaking.
It's not like this little meter where it flutters a little bit and you're like, oh, should I pay attention to that? It eventually is like, whoa, wait a minute. There's something not right here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Let's reflect on it.
Yeah.
And then identify it, and then we move forward.
Right.
We kind of fall back on, accountability and reflection and intentionality there.
I think it's a couple of things. I do believe that it is just this little flutter, if you will,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
The difference is that through our addictive behaviors, that we became desensitized to those little flutters,
Yeah.
if you will. Okay.
Yeah.
And that recovery is now bringing the sensitivity back. And so the more we work our recovery, the more we focus on doing the sorts of things that puts us in a good place, we become more and more sensitive to those little flutters,
Yeah.
if you will, if that's how we describe them. But it's a variety of different things. But it's the sensation of just saying, that doesn't sit well, that doesn't feel right, that
Yeah.
doesn't whatever.
Mhm.
And
Or
I'm
it
paying
does.
Or it does.
Or it does,
That's
yeah.
right. And I'm paying attention to that.
Mhm.
The fact that you went back on your job offer to
Yeah.
say, I'm sorry, but that's not going to work for me.
Yeah.
And how that's paid off for you in dividends.
Yeah.
Right. So, recovery has given you the sensitivity to say, I'm not sure I'm willing to take that.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, in the past, I have taken a job, and it would
and
it
then
would be
regretted
less
it.
money.
Yeah.
It'd be less money than I was making before, and then I'm working harder.
Yeah.
And I'm regretting it. I'm hating it.
Right,
Yeah, I
right.
don't like the job, and then at the same time, I'm secretly looking for another one, which is not fun to do
Right.
either.
No. So I think it's a big part of life.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
those intuitions. I honestly believe that each one of us have some level of, and you can call it whatever you want to call it. I know there are lots of circles that call it a variety of different things, but I believe that people have some level of intuition that
I
goes
agree.
on.
Yeah.
And
And,
addiction really dulls the senses to that.
yeah.
I think addiction intentionally deadens it.
It does. I agree with
think
that.
that's one of the things that you're trying to numb away.
Right, right. Which, interestingly enough, one of the things that we've described about addictive behavior is that sensation of being past feeling.
Right.
Yeah.
We're literally emotionally dead to those sorts of intuitive things that come our way.
Mhm.
So, it's a great topic,
It is, and it plays really well into the next one.
Yes.
which is
Spirituality. Now, I love this one so much. This plays right into your step 11.
yes.
You know, there are so many ways that you need to develop this, but I loved that it singled out, and I love that it's singled out in such a way that you have to pay attention to it and acknowledge that my spirituality is something that I do in fact need to develop.
Yes, I
This
agree.
is an aspect of who and what I am that needs some attention,
right.
you know, and there's you know, to develop the connection to something much bigger than yourself is powerful.
I agree.
There's a lot of meaning there that can be
Mhm.
found there.
I will tell you my observation so
Mhm.
far. If there is a mass casualty associated with addiction, it's spirituality.
I agree.
Oh yeah.
I don't sit in a room ever with any group of people and talk about addiction in any way, shape, or form that the topic of spirituality isn't a part of that discussion, and just the sense of hopelessness, helplessness, anger, frustration, everything associated with their frustration at a higher power and what they believe that they thought they knew when they were growing up, or that
Mhm.
they lost, or whatever. There is nothing but despair associated with that topic when it comes to addictions, and any addiction of any type.
Right.
And so I'm a big time advocate. I think I've mentioned that 1,000 times even on these podcasts, that I think it behooves each one of us to figure out how it was that sort of this faith of our understanding, the spirit, and I won't even say religion or religiosity. I don't, but we've got to figure out how that relationship with a higher power exists,
damaged?
was
Yeah.
damaged, and we need to understand how it works in each one of us. And because to some extent, there is no doubt in my mind, particularly in the household I grew up in, there's no doubt in my mind that the relationship that I had with a higher power was a big part of my acting out behavior as a young child. What I mean by that is, and maybe I'm not saying that incredibly well, it's the fact that I felt like I cried out however many times in the middle of the night. That was basically like, look, take this problem. I know this is a problem. My mom and dad aren't going to understand this in any way, shape, or form. Please help me out here. And he didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so to come back to that, to now as an adult at 58 years old, and spend some time with that and understand that in it with an adult developed brain, has been the most rewarding piece for me of anything.
So for me, I mean, spirituality, and with addiction, I think you're right. It's this giant pit of despair, of darkness and hopelessness that we've dug. We've continued to dig deeper and deeper and deeper, to the point that no matter how loud we yell, no one can hear us. But when we take on this spirituality, it's like this little glimmer of hope. We've light this little candle that we can follow and climb up this hill till we can get out and see the light.
Right.
And as long as we know that light is there, we can, we believe that there is someone listening to us, even though things aren't transpiring yet. And I think even the act of lighting that candle, per se, is that hope that, okay, there is someone here. because if there wasn't this candle wouldn't have been lit. This
Right.
hope wouldn't be there. But there's enough there, and there's always been, and and our higher power, whatever. I do think they've listened, but again, there's agency, and even though we're crying out, take this away, it's like, well, I know you want me to. You say it, but you're not doing it, and until you get to a point of doing, then I can actually start doing stuff. And I think that's where we have to get, when we hit rock bottom, we're finally at that point where, okay, I'm willing to do the next right thing, whatever I need to do to get better. And then that's when our higher power could say, all right, now I can step in, because we've made that decision. Because otherwise we're just being rebellious.
Yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
You're fine.
No, I was just going to say, when we take the impulse of the moment and we make it paramount in our lives over everything else, which is what addicts do.
Right.
It might even be an adequate definition of addiction to a certain degree. When you make the impulse of the moment, whatever it might be, whatever that drug of choice is, and that becomes paramount in your life, then that becomes your God.
Right.
To which you sacrifice all.
Right.
And you very much can create your own. You can take your life and create your own little corner of hell.
Absolute
you
truth.
can make yourself just absolutely wretched, miserable, and hopeless.
Oh yeah.
Now, what the biggest significance in my life is that I've been in that place, and I know very well what that feels like.
Right.
And like you said, Daniel, the first time that I was honest with the therapist and finally told another human being everything that I was dealing with, there was a fundamental switch. And he looked at me, and I thought there would be condemnation and all kinds of stuff about to rain down on me. And what I got was, now we can get to work. And from that point on, everything was different. And because it put a little spark of hope.
Yeah. In a absolutely hopeless circumstance.
There was a little spark of hope, and then suddenly it's like, oh, okay. I'm going to exercise some provisional beliefs. I'm going to exercise a little faith, and I'm going to start working on that. And we're going to see what's going to happen. And it didn't take, even though there was so much to do and so many consequences that needed to be cleaned up, for the first time in my adult life, I felt hope, and I felt connected. I started to feel worth.
Right.
And I attribute all of that to taking the steps, because just as easily as you can sculpt your life into a hell, you can make it into a heaven.
You can.
And it
And
takes
I think that actually ties in really well with perspective.
Yeah,
Right.
which is what I wanted to. It's going to feed right into this. In fact, a lot of times lying in bed, asking God or your higher power to take this from you, too often we have such a narrow perspective.
We do.
And there's a couple of ways I want to talk about perspective. I mean, first of all, it's so invaluable, and this can go right back to your recovery support. It's so invaluable to have the perspective of other people too, to kind of check where you're at and to give you a broader view. But when you can learn to look at your life, not just as what I'm doing in this moment, but also as almost a community of you across your life. The decisions I make today are going to affect the me of tomorrow, and the me of tomorrow, am I going to be grateful for the decision I made today?
Right.
And realize that when you cry out for relief from this, that I cried out for release from this for a very, very long time. And the moment I was ready to actually do what was necessary to do it, it was there.
It was there.
Just like that.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of work. It was a lot of work, but it came.
Yeah.
And I've often reflected, there's another one. I've often reflected back over my life, and I've thought, I don't think that I was ever abandoned. I think I had to get to a certain place to where that change could be affected.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's perspective. But I like the idea The Sage 3 book uses this wonderful relativity comparison about a train. And I know that we've mentioned it before, but you got to think of yourself as a passenger on the train, moving from car to car. You know, sometimes you're in the sleeping car, and sometimes you're in the you know,
Dining car.
dining car,
Yeah.
whatever. You know, but you've also got to look at yourself from the perspective of the person on the hill that can see the train and its entire journey
Mhm.
and knows what's coming.
Yeah.
You know, we talked a little bit about self-care, and sometimes I'd jump in bed and say, I don't want to brush my teeth, you know, screw you tomorrow, Gary, but I think, no, I better get up and do it. And then in the morning, it's like,
I'm so glad I brushed my
thank you
teeth.
last night, Gary.
Yeah.
You know, you saved me again. But you see what I mean?
Oh, yeah,
There's
absolutely.
a perspective, and you've got to learn to look at yourself as a work in progress, and the kind of work in progress that takes a lifetime to complete.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, my perspective's definitely changed over the years, because I remember I always thought of this addiction as a curse. Like,
Mhm.
wow, why was I cursed with this? Out of everything in the world, why
Yeah,
this?
why this?
You know, and now that's changed. That perspective has changed
Yeah.
to something more,
Mhm.
you know, based in gratitude. Like, wow, if it wasn't for everything I've gone through, you know, all these people that I've helped because of my, you know, what I've gone through, my so-called curse, you know, I have a very unique set of skills because of it,
Right.
and a unique set of circumstances that relate with other people. And because of that, I can talk to them. I can
Yeah.
empathize with them. I can know what that's like, and I can help them out when they're in those darker places. And something that I once thought as a curse is now a gift. It's
Yeah.
a tool
Yeah.
that I can use to help others. And it's such an amazing shift in that perspective, because now it doesn't weigh me down.
Right.
Mhm.
It's something that, okay, you know, that was then, this is now, and who can I help? What can I do moving forward? Which is another reason why we made this podcast.
Yeah. I'm actually going to add an interesting take on the topic here. We're talking about perspective and about spirituality
Yes.
almost sort of simultaneously. I'm going to add a perspective here that may or may not be accurate, but it's my perspective. My perspective is that I don't believe that anybody will find true recovery until they've tackled the elephant in the room, which in a lot of cases is the topic of spirituality.
Mhm.
I just don't believe that it's possible to get past that. And I don't think it's any small thing that when we start talking about the steps, that
is-
steps 2 and 3
Yeah.
are right at the very front of what we talk about.
Step 1, I have a problem. Step 2,
That's right.
there's something that can solve it.
That's right. And
I can't. What does it say? Step 1, I can't. Step 2, he can. Step 3, I'm going to
I'm
let
going
him.
to let him do. I'm going
Yep.
to let him. Yeah. So there's that's not
Mhm.
that's not just
No.
by happenstance.
No, it's not.
So my point is that, and I don't think I'm stepping too far out on a limb when I say that's an elephant in the room that every addict is going to have to address. They're going to have to deal with that particular topic in terms of how that played into their addictive behavior, and therefore how it's going to play in their recovery. It has to come out. It
Yes.
simply does. And I don't think true recovery can occur until somebody does. That's my perspective on
I
the topic of spirituality.
Agree.
Okay. I just wanted to
Absolutely, I
put
do.
that out there, because you know, there's a lot of people who, if there's a casualty at all, if there's a casualty of addictive behavior, it's that very topic.
It's interesting to me. It's interesting to me that in a lot of ways, it can almost be well, I almost want to say it can be the first casualty.
Yes,
You know,
I think you're
and
right.
and it's so interesting to me that, you know, the 12 steps are described as a spiritual recovery. It's a
Yes.
spiritual process.
That's right.
You know, it's a spiritual process that you go through, and that's not by accident either.
No, I don't think so at all. I don't think so at all.
Because no, you're absolutely right, and there's a reason that it's so that your higher power, God, is so intimately intertwined with all of the steps
Yes.
of recovery.
Yes.
You know, because you really do have to get right with your higher power.
You do.
You know, and I will tell you that with step 11 kind of stuff, your understanding and perspective of who and what that is deepens dramatically.
Absolutely.
If you
Absolutely.
if you
It has to.
surrender, you have to
It
surrender
has
that
to.
to the process.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So anyway, that's
no,
wanted to throw that out there because I think I see so many people who want to gloss over those steps and say, look, this is not a good experience for me. I'm scooting past this, and I'm like, I don't see how you can.
And do you know what? It's kind of strange that even in the confines of our podcast and just the three of us here, it's almost like we approached it a little gingerly, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, and that too
That's
is
a great
interesting.
point.
But no, that
it's out there.
it is.
It has to be out there.
And it has to be addressed. So our next one is consciousness.
I love this
I'm
word.
not aware of
You're a bit unconscious, is what you're trying to say.
What are your thoughts?
I love this word. It suggests a presence. It suggests an awareness of.
I like the word presence.
Yeah, it suggests to my mind anyway the idea that I have to be aware of my surroundings. I have to be aware of the people in my life. I have to be, and so much of this addiction has dulled the senses around consciousness.
Right. Do you know what? Not only do you have to be aware of the environment around you, and you have to be aware of what you're feeling, but then you have to be aware of how you're feeling is connected to the environment around
Yes.
you. You know,
Yes.
you've got to, you just got to be conscious and I don't know how quite to.
I'll use the example of driving. I think driving brings out some interesting things in people.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if you saw it on the news here just recently of an individual that it's just the road rage experiences are just really interesting to me now.
Right.
Because I was a part of all that.
Right.
I drive about 30 miles one way, 35 miles one way to get to my office, and I will tell you that driving in today's environment is a hand-to-hand combat every day. But my point is that I used to be drawn into that. There was a day I remember driving home in a big 18-wheeler truck, and I kind of got into it, and we were all the way back and forth to the point where he was almost pushing me off the road. And I think about that because that's who I was at that point in time. And when I think about this consciousness kind of idea is how do I get drawn into a place where I would allow myself to literally be stupid, right? To think that
You were going to lose that fight.
I was going to lose that fight. And that's literally where I think that's what happens to a lot of us is that we get drawn into a place that we wouldn't always go.
And we get consumed.
We get consumed by it. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Consciousness. No, I like the idea of being aware. I like the idea of paying attention and keeping your eyes and your thoughts open to the things that are going on around you and the people and what's going on
the people that are
their
in there.
world.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah. I think of how many times I made decisions not even giving any consideration or thought to how that would affect my wife or my family.
Well, that's a skill that takes a lot of practice to master,
does.
doesn't
It does.
It really
I mean,
does.
at least for me in my addiction, I was not aware of the
Right.
ripples. You know, I was just like, oh, it's just affecting me. It's not damaging or hurting anyone
Oh,
else.
dear.
But then, after years of this, you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, like
Yeah.
I wasn't lobbing a teeny pebble into the pond. I was throwing a freaking boulder in there, and the ripples were just hitting everything and sloshing in the pond.
Tsunami level waves of
Yeah, and and I mean, I'm still dealing with some of those after effects with my older kids, which is not fun.
No.
My oldest daughter is getting married in October, and I may not be at the wedding, and I have to accept that as part of one of those consequences. The door isn't completely closed, but it's just cracked. It's cracked
not wide
open.
open
Yeah, there's a crack there.
Yeah.
I have to wait for her to be able to step forward and come to me and say, "Okay, I'm ready." But that's one of those side effects, and it's because I was not conscious of what was going on around me.
And Daniel, you make such a good point. I can't imagine how. Do you know? It's kind of strange because in a lot of ways, I think back to the years in the moments when I was most active in my addiction.
Mhm.
Right.
And do you know what? I can't remember the events that were going on in my life around those times.
Yeah.
Right.
Like things that should have been significant, like, oh, don't you remember when this happened? It's like, no, I was so
Yeah.
consumed and oh god.
Well, yeah, I mean, my older kids are like, there was things that happened, and we want you to, say you're sorry for X, Y, Z, and I'm like, I don't even remember that.
I don't even remember.
And it's because I was so consumed, and I
Yeah.
don't, and so I just have to say, I'm sorry I did that. I was in the wrong,
Yeah.
and just own it. Go back to being accountable.
Right.
Even though I don't remember. I mean, I could easily just say, that never happened. What are you talking about? But then that's just me being in that
Gaslighting.
crappy place, gaslighting.
Being
and
unconscious
yeah,
of what you're doing.
yeah, not being conscious and not taking accountability.
Yeah.
Consciousness.
Because
point.
I'm pretty sure they're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
was
were unconscious.
crappy, yeah.
We lived a life of unconsciousness.
Yes.
So I want to remind all of our listeners right now that we're talking about the topic of resilience.
Yes.
And that these are expert systems. And when we say expert, we have to evaluate whether we're, on a scale of 1 to 10, are we a 1 or are we 10? But these are areas that we need to develop capability and mastery in
Yes.
in order to develop resilience. That's what we're talking about here. Now, this isn't intended to be a comprehensive list or an exhaustive list, I guess I should say. It's
Yeah.
fairly comprehensive but not exhaustive. And there may be things for each one of our individual listeners unique to them that we're not talking about. So
Yeah.
just be aware of that. But again, this topic of resilience, the ability to play a poor hand well. Love that definition.
Yes.
So
And
just-
the other thing I would add to this is, as you're working your recovery, you may not be, some may be high,
That's
some may be
exactly
middle,
right. Yeah.
some may be low. You need to work on these.
Yeah.
No one's going to be perfect across the board.
That's right. That's right. Great point. Great point. And the next one, we've talked about consciousness. The next one is compassion.
Yeah.
Compassion. Compassion.
Compassion.
This
Yeah.
one, the hardest one for me was being compassionate towards myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was easier to be compassionate towards others in my, during my addiction and stuff like that. But even then was kind of false. It wasn't as good as it could have been. But it was still a lot better than I ever gave myself.
The description I give more than anything is that is to be sitting in a room. Again, that the description is past feeling, right?
Mhm.
And past feeling was to see others affected by either the things that I did wrong or the things that I didn't do or whatever the case may be, who were affected in my world and not caring.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a place of just, well, you hurt me, and so this is just me getting even with
yeah.
you. It was a space of non-compassion if I've ever been there, and that's a place I never want to go back to.
And if it wasn't that type, it was, I'm not comfortable with this, so I'm going to crack a joke.
That's right.
Or I'm going to change the subject to something else that I
Yeah.
can feel okay with.
That's right. That's right. Those are all very real experiences
Yeah.
in my universe. So, yeah, that compassion that's a difficult one for me, and quite honestly, you just don't turn the page on that overnight.
Mm-mm.
That takes
No.
years to develop. That just simply
Yeah, I'm
does.
still working on that one.
Yeah.
I mean, there are times where I still, my younger kids, I have to sit down, I can start seeing things because I'm being more attentive. I'm following that intuition. Like for example, my boy walks into his room and I haven't seen him for a while.
Yeah.
So I'll walk in there and I'll sit down. What's going on? And then he'll start talking to me. Like maybe I said something, I didn't mean it in a way, but my voice slightly raised, and he took that as me yelling at him.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would sit there and we'd talk, but I'd have compassion and hear him out. Now it's like, what are you again, not being like, what are you talking about? I didn't raise my voice. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sorry that upset you.
Yeah.
And let him get those emotions out and let him talk about that and have compassion. I'm like, okay, how can I change that?
Right.
He's 6, but he gets to feel like, oh wow, I have a voice and how I can change the situation. Dad's actually paying attention. He's validating what I'm feeling. Because I remember as a kid, if I would have said that, it would have been, shut up.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
I know how that would have been at my house.
Yeah.
My mom would have said, "You're too sensitive."
Oh, yeah, or that, I would have got that.
Yeah, you're too sensitive.
Why are you being a sissy type comment? And it's just like, I don't want to instill that with my kids. I
Right.
want to show them something different, especially as I'm learning about this. And then when I step back from that, then I have to be compassionate towards myself, like, oh man, because there would be several times, even a couple years ago, I'd come back like, oh, I'm a crappy dad.
Right.
Instead, it's like, okay, I made a mistake. Let's correct this.
Yeah.
So the next time, this isn't an issue for either of us.
Good stuff. Good stuff. All right,
Compassion.
Gary. Last one.
All right. Mindfulness. Mindfulness.
This one's got a great description right here on the page previous. I love this. Maybe it's 2 pages. These are the things that identify specifically with mindfulness, and there's some here that are
Improved focus and attention. lowered stress, higher resistance to damaging effects of cortisol, the stress hormone.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Emotional self-regulation is more effective. Reduced brain cell loss associated with aging. Reversed memory loss. Increased tolerance to pain. Many regions and parts of the brain became more dense, consequently more functional. Capacity for making good decisions improved dramatically, and cognitive performances improved significantly. Mindfulness.
Yeah. If there's a topic out there that I think most people are interested in, particularly in today's day and age, it's peace. It's this idea of peace. And one of the things that mindfulness talks about is this lowered stress. Lowered stress and emotional self-regulation is more effective.
Oh yeah.
I'm finding that every day as my recovery moves forward. Gary's famous for saying, I'm better today than I was yesterday, sort of stuff. And I find that to be absolutely true. That the further along the recovery path that we move, that we're in a better place to lower stress, to deal with situations, to be much more resilient, which is really what we're talking about here, and able to deal with circumstances of life. Again, reminding me of the 9-step promise. That's something along the lines that the things that used to baffle us are now just happening naturally among us, and I think that's fantastic.
I actually like how this one's the last one, because if you look back at the list, each one of these are kind of, play into being mindful.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
If you're being intentional, if you're, have self-care, if you're being accountable, if you are studying and learning, all of these things can tie into being into mindfulness.
Yeah,
very easily.
I wonder if the order that these are presented isn't. I think it's an intentional decision.
It probably is,
because it does
Carnes.
seem to build on itself quite a bit.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
So, mindfulness has been wonderful. Again, there are times where I can start feeling the stress or my anxiety, where in the past it was just that was immediately the sign to go, go act out.
Yeah.
Now it's like I can feel it starting. It's like, oh, well, I need to go do something.
I need to
go
deal with
do
this,
some self-care. I need to go change the environment, lower my stress, go connect
Right.
with someone
Right.
or do something, whether that's a conscious act, whether that's go be compassionate and help someone. It's a bunch of different things that allow me to lower that, and then I'm back in a good place because
Right.
I'm very mindful of where I am. I'm mindful of my body, my
The messages your body's telling
yeah.
you. Yeah.
Where in the past it wasn't. It was almost like I was on autopilot.
Right.
And so now I'm very mindful of those things, and I can, self-correct.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Good stuff. Well, there it is, Gary. I think
There it
we've
is.
talked about 12 expert systems that lead us toward greater resilience.
All right, guys. Remember, resilience, the ability to play a poor hand well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we get those every now and then.
Yes, we
a
do.
lot.
You may find that things are going really well, and then you're dealt a bad hand, but that doesn't mean that you're out of the game, like Gary said. You can lean on these tools, these expert systems, and still get through that game,
Right.
and survive till the next round.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great stuff.
Great stuff. So remember, you have a move to make and a turn to take.
Yep.
And this is Gary telling you to do the next right thing.
And this is Mike saying, do the work necessary to find the peace that recovery can bring.
And this is Daniel saying, find the humility in your recovery.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you like this episode, please give us a 5-star rating on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you find us.
As a fellowship of recovering addicts, Sex Addicts Anonymous offers a message of hope to anyone who suffers from sex addiction. Check out saa-recovery.org.